Welcome to today's explainer. Let's just jump right in. I want you to close your eyes for a second and picture an ancient Indian monastery right before the sun comes up. It's perfectly cool, the earth is dead quiet, and literally the only thing you can hear is the slow, gentle movement of a nearby river. Sounds incredibly peaceful, right? But beneath that perfectly serene cinematic surface, there is a really heavy burden being carried. Today we're diving into a profoundly human story about a very specific kind of dread, a fear that doesn't really have a name. We're not talking about the fear of a snake, or a sudden fire, or falling off a steep cliff. No, this is a much, much heavier burden. It all boils down to one absolutely crucial question. What if the thing you're so terrified of hasn't even happened yet? In that dark, quiet monastery we were just picturing, there lived a young monk. His name was Sona. He's in his mid-20s, slim build, shaved head, a guy who literally left his home, his family, and his entire old life behind to follow the path of the Buddha. But as he's lying there awake in the pitch black, totally surrounded by other sleeping monks, Sona is trapped in a struggle that I think we can all deeply relate to. He is just completely consumed by the fear of a future that hasn't even arrived. Now, during the day, Sona is the absolute picture of tranquility. He's in his simple, dark burgundy robes, he meditates at dawn, he walks in total silence. By every outward measure, the guy is totally calm. But the true battle, that kicks off the second the sun goes down. It is the fear of tomorrow. When the whole monastery goes completely still, Sona's mind just absolutely refuses to rest. It races ahead of him, spiraling into tomorrow, the day after that, and into years he hasn't even lived yet. It is that classic what-if spiral. You know the one. As Sona lay there in the dark, these questions would just flood his brain. What if I get sick and nobody is around to help me? What if the monastery loses its funding and we all go hungry? What if I get old and suddenly realize I wasted my one precious life on the completely wrong path? And every single question just kicked the door open for another one. Honestly, by the time the birds even started singing outside, Sona had already lived through 100 agonizing disasters that hadn't happened, and realistically were probably never going to happen anyway. And this silent mental suffering, it started taking a very real physical toll on him over the months. Sona's face grew drawn. His eyes had this permanent, exhausted, worried look to them. If you looked really closely during the morning bowl offerings, you'd actually see his hands trembling. The other monks definitely noticed, of course. But in the quiet culture of a monastery, suffering was just something you were expected to sit with in silence. You didn't speak of it. But every single human mind has a breaking point, right? One morning, Sona just couldn't take the sleepless, torturous nights for another second. He spotted the elderly Buddha walking all alone near the slow-moving river, just like he usually did before the rest of the monastery woke up. Sona was exhausted, he was desperate, he hadn't slept a wink, and without even making a conscious decision to do it, he just found his feet, carrying him straight toward his teacher. "Teacher," Sona said, and his voice actually cracked when he spoke. Buddha stopped, turned to him completely, and just offered him his full compassionate attention. And Sona's confession just spilled out of him in a massive rush, like water pouring out of a cracked vessel. He said, "I am afraid of the future. Not of one thing, of everything. I lie awake, calculating every single way my life could fall apart. Sickness, poverty, loneliness, old age, death. Please tell me, how do I stop being afraid of what hasn't even happened yet?" Now, Buddha didn't answer right away. He just stood there, looking out at the river for a long time. It was so quiet that Sona actually started worrying he had asked a foolish question. But then, very slowly and deliberately, Buddha bent down to the earth. He picked up this small, completely ordinary stone from the riverbank, cool from the night air, and held it out. "Hold this," he told Sona. Completely confused, Sona took it. Then, Buddha made an impossible request. He looked at him and said, "Now hold also the stone from tomorrow." Sona just blinked, staring at his teacher. "Teacher," he replied, "there is no stone from tomorrow. It doesn't exist yet." Buddha looked calmly right into Sona's tired eyes and asked, "Then why were you trying to hold it all night?" Just take a second to really let that hang in the air. Imagine Sona standing there by the water, this real, physical stone, heavy and cool in his palm, completely silenced by the sudden realization of what he'd been doing to his own mind. Buddha gently gestured for Sona to sit down beside him on the riverbank. He explained that Sona thought his fear was about the future, but the future doesn't actually have any weight. It has no shape. It is absolutely not a stone you can physically hold in your hand. What Sona was actually carrying in that moment was merely a thought about the future. And a thought, no matter how heavy or dark or terrifying it feels in the middle of the night, is not the thing itself. Sona argued back a little, pointing out that, well, terrible things like illness and loss do actually happen in life. Buddha totally agreed, but he offered this incredibly powerful analogy. He asked Sona to think back to scraping his knee as a little kid. Did he handle that childhood pain with the child's strength or the strength of a fully grown man? Sona answered that he used a child's strength, and it was enough. Buddha then asked, what if you had handed that small child the heavy, complex sorrows of a grown man, like deep grief or long illnesses? Could the kid have carried it? Sona shook his head. No way. It would have broken me. I wasn't ready. And right there is the core lesson. Buddha gently looked at Sona and said, you still aren't ready. Not for a sorrow that has not arrived. He explained that Sona was trying to meet tomorrow's difficulty using today's strength, in advance, way before it was even due. It's literally impossible. It is exactly like trying to eat tomorrow's meal today, right on top of today's meal, and then wondering why you feel so incredibly sick. But Sona asked the million-dollar question, how do you actually stop these thoughts? Buddha's response was this really beautiful visual metaphor. He basically said, you don't actually have to stop the fears from showing up, you just have to stop chasing them. Think of a fear like a bird that lands on a branch right next to you. If you just sit still, it's gonna look around and eventually fly away. But if you run after every single bird, desperately trying to catch it, examine it, and figure out exactly what it means, you are gonna spend your entire life frantically running around, and you will mistakenly call it thinking. This whole parable lines up flawlessly with a major concept in psychology. Buddha referred to it as the second arrow. Look, if life hits you with a real hardship or an illness, that is the first arrow. It hurts. It's completely unavoidable. But our minds, never satisfied with just one wound, decide to shoot a second arrow into the exact same spot. We add endless worry. We replay the event over and over. We imagine these crazy worst-case scenarios. That second arrow, it is entirely optional. It's mind-manufactured suffering. When we sit around terrified of the future, we're basically firing arrows into a wound that doesn't even exist yet. There's no first arrow, but we just keep shooting anyway. Now, it's absolutely vital to point out that Buddha wasn't telling Sona to just be careless. Sona still had to be responsible. But there is a massive difference between preparation and rumination. Preparation is super useful, and it has an endpoint. You spot a problem, you make a solid plan, and then you set it down. Rumination, on the other hand, is endless. It literally solves nothing. It's just your mind doing a free rehearsal for pain that hasn't happened yet, as if rehearsing it is somehow going to magically protect you. It won't. Worrying tonight is not going to make tomorrow's problems any easier. It literally just ruins tonight. So how can we actually put this into practice tonight if our minds start racing ahead? The explainer breaks it down into 3 really concrete steps. First up, notice. Notice the difference between a real, physical problem right in front of you today and an imagined one 3 steps down the road. If there's an action you can take today, do it, and consider the future handled for now. Second, name it. When a fear pops up and there's no action attached to it, just name it. Tell yourself, this is just a thought. Don't chase the bird, let it sit on the branch. And third, remember the stone. What does remembering the stone mean? It means remembering your own track record of resilience. Think about this for a second. You have never, ever failed to survive a single one of your worst days. Every single time you were there for it, you met it with the exact amount of strength that showed up on that specific day, and you made it through to the other side. Tonight is not one of those worst days. Tonight is just a free rehearsal your brain is forcing you to sit through. So as we picture Sona finally sitting there, totally at peace beside the river, with that ordinary stone resting harmlessly on the bank while the water just keeps flowing by, I want to leave you with this final thought. You simply cannot carry tomorrow's suffering today. Prepare when it actually helps, but when there is absolutely nothing left to do, will you put the stone down tonight? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.